What's up, guys? Welcome back to episode 219 of the Alpha Girl Confidence Podcast. I'm your host, Shay Haddo, and in this episode, we're going to be talking about the difference between comparison and competing. So this is a topic that recently came up in one of our calls on Beyond the Athlete, where we spent a whole hour talking about how to navigate comparison, how to instead switch to competing. We talked about comparison from comparing yourself to other people, which we'll go into in today's episode. And then also kind of that self-comparison of comparing yourself from one practice or one game to the next game, right? So there's a pretty good difference that I want to first differentiate between comparison and competing, right? So comparison is usually negative, right? So comparison is when you're taking, and I don't want to say negative, but usually it's not helpful, right? So comparison is when you're looking at someone else or something else and you're comparing it. You're comparing usually their strengths to your weaknesses. So you're looking at them. So it's a very external focused thing, right? There's this famous picture of Michael Phelps and somebody else in the Olympics where Michael Phelps was a little bit ahead and this guy, he lost the lead because you can see in the picture, he's turning his head. He's looking over at Michael Phelps. He's comparing. He's not competing at that point because he's purely focused on what Michael Phelps is doing. So generally, when we think of comparison, think of it's we're more externally focused. We're so focused on them that we're not focused on us, which is why comparison isn't very helpful. Whereas competing, on the other hand, I am a huge fan of competing. I'm super competitive myself. I love to compete, whether it's in my 3-on-3 basketball games, whether it's in a board game, like you name it, I am competitive. And that's something that I use to my advantage and something that I have used to my advantage my whole life, my whole career, is because of how competitive I am. So I think sometimes we get into this space where it's like we can't compete or we don't compete because we don't want to compare. So that's why I'm spending some time actually separating the two. So comparison is, it's more about your thinking. You're thinking about what they have and what you don't. Not helpful. Whereas competing is you're more focused on you, you're focused on going out and it's the action, right? It's the act of competing. Whereas comparison, again, is more of a heady thing, more of you being in your head. So I want to separate that first because I don't want you to think, I shouldn't compare myself, so I'm not going to compete. No, that's like the opposite of what I'm saying. What I'm saying is the less you compare to other people, the more you can actually compete in a healthy way that's not only going to help you, your confidence, your performance, but it's also going to help your teammates, right? Like the more you compete, the more you show up every day for every practice, every game, and you compete, the better your team is going to get. The more responsive, your team is going to be to you as a leader. So there's so many benefits to being competitive. And honestly, probably the most important thing and the best benefit of being competitive is that it's fun. At least for me, when I'm having like fun, it's when I'm being really, really competitive. So comparison, competition, different. So when you notice that you're comparing yourself to somebody else, just recognize it first. Recognize, there it goes again. There goes the comparison again. Okay, so instead of being externally focused and focus on them, ask yourself, what can I do to focus on me? Like, what are my strengths? What makes me special? Then go execute on it and practice in your game. Go compete. Not to be better than the other people, but to be the best that you can be. I know that's super cheesy, super cliche, but it's the truth. Because if you're the best you, then it doesn't really matter what else is going on around you. There's always going to be people that are better than you, right? Unless you're like LeBron James or something. But there's always going to be people better than you. And even the LeBron James example, there's players better than him at certain things, right? Is he the best 3-point shooter? No. Steph Curry is, right? So he's not the best at everything, right? So that's the thing, is there's always going to be someone better than you at something. It does no good to see and nitpick and start figuring out, okay, what are they better at? No, like let's focus on you, bring it to you. What are you really good at? Now go execute, go compete on that. Okay, then the second half of this podcast, take a deep breath, let that soak in. The second half of this podcast, I want to talk about the self-comparison. So this is something that's a little bit more tricky because we think that growth, whether it's in your sport or life, should be linear. And when I say linear, I mean that it's just this either straight line that kind of goes up gradually, it's this flat line, or it's this gradual decline, that it's just linear, right? So a lot of the time we have this dangerous expectation that growth, that your performance, that your confidence, whatever, should be linear, and that every day you should get a little bit better, and there's no downs. That's really dangerous because when you have a down moment or a game or a practice, you're like, oh crap, I'm going down. There's something wrong with me. I thought I was doing so good, and now you're down because you had one bad game. So that's when, think of it as that's you zooming in from one game to the next. The game one was really good. Game two was not good. So therefore, oh no, I'm going downhill. That's dangerous to look at it that way. Instead, what you want to do, and if you're doing the work, if you're doing the mental work, the physical work, if you zoom out and look at a whole year, you'll see that you had a good game, and then a bad game, and then a good game, and then a really good game, and then a not so good game, right? You'll see that there's ups and downs all along the journey. And if you're watching on YouTube, you can see my hand. You'll see that there's ups and downs all along the journey. But over time, when you zoom out, you can see that there's growth upwards, but it's not linear, meaning there's no such thing as just up, 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 up. Number one, that would be extremely boring. But number two, that's just not possible, because the best way to learn and to grow is to have those bad practices, is to have those bad games when you can learn from it. If you can't learn from it and you're just going to judge yourself, then you're probably not going to get much better, which is why you're listening to this podcast, because you're going to get better from this. So next time you have a bad game or a bad practice or a bad test, what can you learn from that? That should be the number one question to ask yourself. Okay, cool. It happened. It happens to literally the best athletes in the world. What can I learn from this? Okay, great. Now we're going to build for the next game. You're going to zoom out. You're going to see, you know what? It's okay. I just had one bad game. It's one little speed bump. Doesn't mean that I'm going downhill. Just means that this is part of the process, right? So that's the thing. And when you do have a really good game, it can be easy for us to think, oh my gosh, I need to have another really good game. I gotta play up to this standard every single time. And if I don't, I'm not good enough. That's where it gets a little bit dangerous, right? So when you do have a really good game, like, build on that momentum. Be excited for the next game. Don't be fearful about, oh no, what if I don't play as well? Because the chances are you're going to play just as good or better. So when you do have a good game, love it, relish in it, but build that momentum and realize that if your next game or practice isn't as good, that's okay. It's part of the process, right? So self-comparison. It's good to take and be like, okay, I want to get 1% better every day, and you can. Where we want to go with competing with ourselves instead of comparing is compete. Can I get in 2 extra minutes today? Can I work on my mindset 1 more minute than I did yesterday? So it's about controlling the controllables. That's competing with yourself so that you can get 1% better every day. But again, 1% better every day is not linear. 1% better every day, there's still going to be ups and downs. So it's important when you feel like you're down in the dumps to zoom out and look at the overall progress. Okay, give yourself grace, look at the progress, and then build momentum from the up or from the down. I know you're probably thinking, well, how can I build momentum from a down moment? By learning from it. That's how you build momentum from a down moment, right? There's nowhere to go but up, right? That's the saying. So take those down moments, learn from them, use them as momentum. And for those up moments, like, keep going, keep it going. And it's okay if you have a bad game. You're human, right? You're human. It's going to happen. All right. So I hope this was helpful. Again, just to recap, kind of the biggest, takeaways that I want you to get from this episode is to realize that growth isn't linear. If you want to get 1% better every day, you have complete control over that by focusing on the controllables, but that doesn't mean that you're not going to have down moments. So if you look at a graph of your progress over your whole life, right? There's going to be some major upswings, maybe some major downswings, and a lot of little ups and downs along the way. But over time, there is going to be the general upward trend of growth. At least there should be if you are focusing on the controllables. So remember, when you don't have a good game, or when you're feeling pressure about, oh, I need to have another good game, give yourself grace. It's okay. Realize that it's going to happen. And you just take that not so good game, not that good moment, and you learn from it. So I hope this was helpful. If it was, please share it with a friend. Let me know what your biggest takeaway is. My DMs are open on Instagram, email, wherever else you can find me. My messages are open. I'd love to hear if this was helpful for you. Share it with a friend if it was, with a teammate that you love, that you want to compete with. Because when your teammates compete with you, guess what? It makes you better. So it's like competition breeds competition. So the more competitive you are, the more competitive your teammates will be. And that's going to be a really hard team to beat. So again, hope it was helpful. Share it with a friend, and I will catch you on next week's episode. Have a great week.